الشباب هنا يوزعوهم عليكم بأسرع وقت ممكن. Sorry. Hello. I'm very sorry, I had to take this call. It's from Her Excellency Lulwa Al-Khater. There's been a misunderstanding. She thought she is following the lecture online. Her team has prepared for her to follow you online, but she's now on her way to come to here. So we'll make a start. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the Center for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies. My name is Sultan Barakat, and I'm the director of the center and also a professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies. As you can see, due to physical distancing restrictions, we have had to spread the audience throughout this large auditorium. However, I'd like to emphasize that wherever you're seated and no matter how far you're away, you are a very special guest to us today. Our health and safety colleagues have done their utmost to strike the right balance between physically gathering and responsibly following public health precautions. I'd also like to draw your attention to the fact that the lecture is being live streamed online on our various social media channels and also on Al Arabi TV. The Center for Conflict and Humanitarian Studies was established in 2016 with the aim of building a world-class hub in the Arab region for research and engagement in conflict mediation, humanitarian action, and post-conflict recovery. Its establishment was driven by the need to create an intellectual space within which we can reflect freely and seriously upon conflict response within our region, a region which unfortunately has now for decades not seen a single day go by without witnessing the devastating effects of war and violence. An important platform for such reflection has been our Distinguished Speakers series, which saw us welcome a number of world leaders over the last few years. Some of you in attendance today may have been present earlier this month at our hosting of President Ghani of Afghanistan. Today, we gather to listen to the views of another world-leading voice, Mr. Pekka Haavisto, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Finland. It is a great honor and privilege to welcome Mr. Haavisto and the senior delegation accompanying him. I'm also honored to welcome our distinguished guests in the audience, and in particular, I must mention Her Excellency Lulwa Al-Khater, who is now making the double effort of rushing from the ministry to be here with us. And unfortunately, because of a miscommunication, she thought it was an online lecture, but she will be with us in a few minutes. I'd also like to mention Dr. Ahmed Al-Muraikhi, Special Advisor to the UN Secretary General, and Sheikha Hussa Al-Thani, Special Envoy to the Secretary General of the Arab League for Humanitarian Affairs. As well, I'd like to mention our deans, Dr. Ali, Hamid Ali, and Dr. Amal Ghazal. Thank you very much for joining us today. And Dr. Shaheen from the university, Hamad University, is with us today as well. It's a great honor to have so many ambassadors attending, including the Eritrean ambassador, who is the Dean of the Diplomatic Corps here in Doha. His Excellency, Mr. Haavisto, is a distinguished and experienced statesman who was appointed as Minister of Foreign Affairs in 2019. He has also served in government as Minister of Environment and Minister of International Development. He's a leading Green Party politician, both in Finland and throughout Europe, acting as a chairperson of the Finnish Green Party, chairperson of the European Green Party, and was the first Green Party candidate in Europe to be appointed as a cabinet minister. He has twice stood in Finland's presidential elections in 2012 and 2018. His Excellency also has long and diverse experience as a development professional and a mediation practitioner, having worked in a wide array of conflict-affected societies. From 1999 to 2005, he led the United Nations Environment Programme's research and analysis in post-conflict contexts, including Iraq, Afghanistan, Kosovo, Liberia, Sudan, and Palestine. In the field of conflict mediation, he has served as the European Union's special representative and later as special advisor to the UN in Sudan and Darfur from 2005 to 2007, and from 2009 to 2017, he served as special representative in African crisis to Finland's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Since 2016, he has held the position of chairman of the Board of Governors of the European Institute of Peace. In his time in office as foreign minister, he has eloquently and persuasively defended Finland's established and successful value-led approach to mediation. During Finland's 6 months holding of the presidency of the Council of the European Union, Minister Haavisto placed crucial issues of the rule of law, social inclusion, global climate change, and citizen security at the center of foreign policy debates in the EU. Of particular interest to some of us here today, particularly those concerned with the Afghan peace talks that are ongoing in Doha. And here I would like to acknowledge and welcome the members of the negotiation teams who are with us today. Finland is particularly important to those talks and to the Afghan peace process, in that Finland will in November be co-hosting the pledging conference for reconstruction of Afghanistan. Finland has proven to be a strong friend of Afghanistan, distributing 385 million euros in development assistance since 2002, making Afghanistan the top recipient of Finnish aid. Finally, I'd like to take the opportunity once more to thank you all for joining us today and for responsibly adhering to the physical distancing rules. Immediately after the lecture and the discussion, His Excellency has got to leave to the airport, and unfortunately there will be no side meetings. We will move quickly out of this room. And I really appreciate if everybody could respect the need for social distancing. We would usually host a reception to thank our speaker and welcome you all, but unfortunately, under the circumstances, we simply are not able to do so today. Yet I hope that one day soon we will be able to mix and gather outside the confines of the lecture hall, as we used to do in the past. And without further ado, I'd like to invite His Excellency Mr. Haavisto to deliver his lecture. Please, Pekka.
Thank you, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to address this audience. At the onset, I would of course like to express my great appreciation to the government of Qatar for hosting my visit here yesterday and today, and also the organizers of this seminar, Doha Institute, and particularly Professor Sultan Barakat, who have been setting up a high-level event on a very timely and important topic. And of course, I'm very curious also on the discussion part and the possible questions and after the lecture. And I will also include some of my recent remarks from my visit to Kabul a couple of days ago. We are living in exceptional times. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to spread around the globe, affecting every corner of the world and every sphere of life. Long-term impact of the COVID-19 remains to be seen. However, it's already clear that it has wide-reaching socio-economic impact as well as potentially grave implications for international peace and security. It's also obvious that neither now or in the future, no country is able to combat pandemics alone. I hope that this pandemic could serve as a wake-up call for stout defense of multilateralism. We need multilateral cooperation more than ever to fight the COVID-19, Joint challenges can only be solved through joint cooperation. Unfortunately, there are governments who were cutting their support for the UN and WHO in this COVID-19 situation. Finland, example, increased last spring the donations to WHO, World Health Organization. In the current situation, my message is clear. Multilateralism and the rules-based international order need our support more than ever today. Not only the pandemic we now witness, but also climate change, extreme poverty, rising cybercrime, and deteriorating humanitarian crisis are threatening the humankind. The rules-based multilateral order and cooperation is the best guarantee we have in our possession for maintaining peace and security, foster sustainable development, and to preserve and protect democracy, rule of law, and human rights. For us in Finland, effective multilateral cooperation based on respect for international law is a key pillar for our foreign and security policy. This pillar strengthens our overall security, lays the ground for human rights, supports the well-being of our citizens, and frames our economic development. There is a strong multilateral element in Finland's efforts to promote conflict prevention and mediation. Finland has shown leadership in strengthening the normative basis for mediation. There are currently 4 UN resolutions on strengthening the role of mediation in the peaceful settlement of disputes, conflicts, conflict prevention and resolution. The UN group of Friends of Mediation that Finland co-chairs with Turkey has currently 60 members, including Qatar. The group aims at promoting and advancing the use of mediation in the peaceful settlement of disputes, conflict prevention and resolution, as well as to generate support for the development of mediation. Conflict prevention, peace building and mediation are long-standing priorities for Finland's foreign policy. Over the past 10 years, Finland has continuously bolstered the status of mediation at national and international level. We want to support the conflict parties in their efforts to strive for peace, as it is only the conflict parties who can end the conflict and build a lasting peace. The current government program states that stronger priority will be placed on conflict prevention, mediation and peace building in Finland's foreign policy. I believe that Finland has a great deal to offer in conflict prevention and resolution. Our national history and strengths make us a credible and reliable mediator. We are also shaping our organization. A Center for Mediation has been set up at the Ministry to boost the implementation of the ambitious objective. By the way, when speaking about Finnish history, when I was working in Sudan, Darfur, talking to late Khalil Ibrahim in Jem or my colleagues Mini Minavio or Abdul Wahid or others, they always say that it's easy to come from Finland, which has always been a peaceful country, and you don't know anything about the war. And then you have to go back to your own history and say, sorry, but 100 years ago, we had the most bloody civil war in Europe, and during the Second World War, our big neighbor attacked us and so forth. And particularly when people were hearing about the civil war and the bitterness that it created, they asked, how have you survived? Why don't you kill each others at the street of Helsinki based on that bitterness that the civil war created? And then you come back to your own history and actually you start to think that what elements of forgiveness, what elements of reconciliation there were 100 years ago or less than 100 years ago to overcome this kind of grievances. And actually it's a very interesting lesson that your own society has learned to live in peace, and also the results of the Second World War where Finland lost part of its territory, evacuated hundreds of thousands of people from that territory. My father was actually living also on that area that was lost to Soviet Union that time. It's very interesting because it's not only the whole society that has handled the issue, but every family, so to say. It touched every family and family members, and they had to overcome somehow what they tell to their children about what has happened and how they teach their children. And I always remember my father, who we sometimes visited the Viborg, which was the lost Finnish city, nowadays part of Soviet Union, and we visited. He saw that was my home, that was my window. But now, because peace is so important, we have to respect the peace agreement. And due to the peace agreement, this window and this house belongs now to other people. So it's not more ours, but peace is ours. And I think that was the lesson I learned as a kid. One of the things that the world knows us for is emphasizing the meaningful participation of women, young people, and religious peacemakers in peace processes. We have also been actively involved in developing the normative and institutional basis for mediation, for example, in the United Nations. We work closely with non-governmental organizations whose competencies complement that of ours. I would also like to mention two specific areas of interest, namely water diplomacy and the role of new technologies in mediation. Climate change, human-driven environmental degradation, and biodiversity loss are changing the living conditions on Earth at an unprecedented speed. Climate change multiplies the risks of conflict and forced migration. Today, climate change is not only an environmental and development issue, but also a security threat. Water availability and water management have become an increasingly evident source of potential conflicts. The scarcity of the world's water resources is striking in the very areas where large scale of the global conflict hotspots are found. Climate change accelerates the risks associated with water availability. Finland has a long tradition in water sector cooperation. The need to organize water management in the border zone in cooperation with the Soviet Union during the Cold War contributed to the development of operating models and technical expertise. This competence can now be used in a new way in conflict prevention and resolution. New technologies are advancing and the world is going digital at a fast pace. These changes create both challenges and opportunities for mediation. And interaction between people is essential in mediation, and it cannot be replaced by technology. This aspect has become very concrete during the COVID-19 pandemic. However, innovations can have potential that could be useful also in mediation and dialogue processes. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, conflict landscape is changing. Conflicts today are of great complexity, inter- and intra-state hybrids, intergroup and identity-based. The landscape is characterized by a proliferation of actors. The effect of COVID-19 on global and regional peace and security is yet to be seen. Though the long-term effects might be unclear, it is likely that the pandemic is a risk multiplier intensifying existing conflicts. Dormant tensions can equally raise their heads when societies face turmoil. In a rapidly changing conflict environment, I believe that multi-track diplomacy, fluid interaction between different negotiation tracks, and cooperation over organizational and state boundaries will be even more essential in the future. In many cases, the number of actors is not the issue in preventing and resolving conflicts, finding complementary ways of working more so. At the regional, national and local levels, we need to think how we can best complement each other's efforts towards a goal that is often a shared one. I want to especially mention the role of civil society and local ownership as the key to a lasting peace. Strong focus on inclusivity should be ingrained in our conflict prevention paradigm, with a special emphasis on the meaningful participation in peace processes of different groups such as women and youth. I would like to concentrate next specifically on youth and women for inclusivity point of view. The proportion of young people in the world's population is currently at an all-time high. Still, we see young people left outside of decision-making, especially in the peace and security-related decision-making. This is very unfortunate. In this time of uncertainty and worldwide crisis, the younger generations can give us all hope. Youth activists and volunteers around the world are stepping up in the fight against shared threats, be it social injustices, curtailing of democracy or COVID-19, by using social media to tackle misinformation, develop innovative ways to take action and create inspiration and messages of hope. Inclusion and meaningful participation of youth is fundamental for sustainable peace and sustainable societies. The youth can be a positive force for peaceful peace and security. Young people are not only victims or perpetrators of conflicts, but they have potential to play a positive role in preventing and resolving conflicts. We need to listen to the youth in every society. They are the voice of the new generation, bringing new and innovative ideas and solutions, and we have much to learn. As part of the implementation of the Youth, Peace and Security Resolution, the UN, a very important UN resolution, Finland hosted the first international symposium on youth participation in peace processes in March 2019. The symposium was co-hosted with Qatar and Colombia and organized in cooperation with the United Nations as well as NGOs. The symposium brought together 100 specialists, mediators, researchers, and opinion makers to share their experiences and best practices on mediation. Half of the attendees were young people with first-hand experience of peace processes in conflict-affected areas. It was a very positive event full of energy. I welcome the initiative of arranging the follow-up symposium in Doha, here in Doha, next year. When we speak about the inclusion, we also speak about the participation of women. We have repeated for years, participation of women is a prerequisite for sustainable peace. This message must keep ringing until we see a tangible change take place. Unfortunately, women's meaningful participation in peace processes still remains very limited. Moreover, sexual and gender-based violence in conflicts continues to be a major challenge to overcome. Women are still too often perceived more as victims than contributors and actors for peace, despite their essential contributions in conflict-related situations. Today I am especially worried about the exclusion of young women. We need to see the multitude and variety of views inside every group we interact with. Intergenerational dialogues and mentoring, as well as comprehensive approach to inclusivity, are useful keys for an inclusive future. In this situation, it's extremely important to support women's leadership and promote women's participation in peace processes. For 5 years ago, the first regional network of women mediators was established. The Nordic Women Mediators Network has clearly succeeded. Other regional networks have been established. Here I would like to mention especially the Arab Women Mediator Network as well as FemWise, the Women Mediators Network of African Union. Networks have had a huge impact on making women in mediation visible. Last autumn, we witnessed how the strengthened cooperation between the regional networks led to the establishment of the Global Alliance of Regional Networks. Finland supports the participation and consideration of women in peace processes in conflict countries, such as Syria and Libya, through various projects. Supporting countries in the preparation and implementation of their women, peace and security national action plans is also an important and concrete way to underline the importance of women in creation of lasting peace in their societies. Ladies and gentlemen, maybe a word about my recent visit to Kabul, Afghanistan. I was there yesterday and day before yesterday, and when entering in Kabul, I remember my first visit to Kabul. I think it was spring 2002. That time, Finance Minister Ashraf Ghani sitting in a bombed king's palace without windows, broken curtains, his son as a secretary, everything still in the disorder after the war. I came to Afghanistan with the UN hat, with the UNEP, United Nations Environmental Programme, and our task was to assess the environmental consequences of the conflict and looking what has happened to the environment of the country. We had the opportunity to visit places like Jalalabad, Kandahar, Wakhan Corridor, Mazar-i Sharif, and of course other areas in the country. And I have to say that wherever we went, people welcomed us and said, what good can the donor community, the UN, now bring to our country after this terrible disaster and after this war? And we could see actually people who have created their own mechanism to survive, but also environmentally very good solutions. There were bioenergy already used in some areas, biogas production, and all kinds of local innovations, how people have survived throughout the difficult times. And we were thinking that, wow, this is a good beginning. But then, unfortunately, for all kinds of reasons, the aid didn't come to all areas of the country. And I know that many of us who were working in UN insisted that we should go to these remote areas, we should go even to the opposition areas or where opposition has been strong, because that would bring this country together. And of course now, 19 years after, we had a good discussions in now President Ghani with the government in Kabul of the current situation. We are preparing as Finland together with the UN, UNAMA, and with the Afghan government, the Donors Conference, which take place in Geneva end of November, so quite soon. Our message to the international community is don't forget Afghanistan at this very crucial moment. Afghanistan is an important development partner for international community, but also the peace in Afghanistan is something that we are all depending. And particularly I'm thinking now also the region, the countries, the neighbors. Whenever talking to Iran or Uzbekistan or to Pakistan or to India, everybody agrees how important peace is for their own development and how important the peace is in Afghanistan is. And I think we have a shared view on that issue. Our battle now when preparing for this conference is to convince the donor community that now is still the time to be committed to the development of Afghanistan. And in the donor community, sometimes you see this phenomenon of donor fatigue. You get tired of some areas, or some new areas are rising up, more acute crises are rising up. And I have to say that I have been not only visiting Kabul and Afghanistan, but doing my round in telephone to ministers and development actors worldwide, trying to convince them that please, let's concentrate one more time to Afghanistan, also because there is an interesting and important process ongoing here in Qatar, Doha. We don't yet know the results of the process. We wish all the best for it, but this is an opportunity for the country. And let's stay committed to this process, and let's hope that also this conference in the end of November in Geneva supports what you are doing here in Doha, Qatar, to bringing the parties together and trying to achieve a common goals in this. So we look from the Finnish point of view, this process here in Qatar is a very important one, and at the same time we think that the coming Geneva conference, donor conference, will support and hopefully will support to achieving peace in the country. And I would love to share views with this, and why I'm still confident. When you are dealing with the peace issues, you meet a lot of cynical people who say that, well, that's an area that there's always a fight, and these are people, they are always fighting, and so forth. And this was something that was said about Sudan also, which I know well. And I have been so happy to follow the Sudan process. Some of the names I mentioned here, who maybe some people were thinking that they will never sign any peace agreement, that they will never agree. And now we have seen a transitional government in Sudan, a process that could lead to the better country, could lead the better results, and now US lifting the sanctions, the terrorism sanctions over the country, and others could give a possibility for them to develop the economy in the country and so forth. So I really would like to end my message with this message of hope, that we have seen some hope in Sudan. We hopefully see that in areas like Yemen and Libya and Syria, but Afghanistan should be also in our mind. Afghanistan has been so far the biggest development partner for Finland as well, and it will remain like that. So our own pledge also in the coming conference will be on that level, that Afghanistan will remain as our top priority also for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, can I please welcome Her Excellency Lulwa Al-Khater, Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs in the State of Qatar and the spokesperson, and apologize to you, Yani. I feel really, really sorry. It's my fault. I should have confirmed that this is in person. I know it's been, for the last few months, we've been not holding events like this. And we all got used to the idea of following things online. So I do apologize and hope you forgive us. To make up for it, we're going to have a very interesting discussion with Mr. Haavisto. And I hope you can also be part of that. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you again for this wonderful presentation. Particularly touching, I think, was referring to your personal experience and the experience you've mentioned, your visit with your father. I've had a very similar one with my father, but in a different part of the world. And I think a lot of people in this audience have probably have that experience. My first question to you, what is it that Finland has done to reach closure? I mean, clearly the Finnish people have now accepted whatever has been passed on to their big neighbor, and they moved on. What is it in your mind? What was the most important aspect of that?
Well, of course, people still remember the history, and we still go again and again back to what happened 100 years ago, or what happened during the Second World War. But we are more looking that as an event from the history, not something that we should put our own identity to. And I just, this is not maybe fair, but I compare with some of my experience at the Balkans, when some people might refer to the fight that was at the 13th century. And then when they start to describe the fight, they feel that they have been there themselves. That it's some so strong part of their identity that, oh, we were losers 1356, or we were winners at that. And somehow that you cannot distance it from yourself and your own identity. And I think that's maybe in the Finnish debate that we accept that's a history and let historians deal what are the facts and what are not the facts from that period and so forth. But of course it remains in families, everybody remembers the family members, some lives lost and so forth, and that's fair enough, that is there. But I think when we discussed, and I have to reveal you that Mr. Ashraf Ghani is an expert on Finnish history. I don't know why, he's maybe expert on many issues. He has been reading so much, but when I met him in Kabul, he raised again that you had a very interesting experience in Finland, that after the civil war, it was 1918, only a couple of years after that, the losing side formed a government. Actually, a government in Finland, and that's an interesting remark. That after 6 or 8 years, we had actually a government that was done by people who even lost their voting rights in the civil war aftermath and so forth. So there was a correction movement in the Finnish society, and it was very, very important, I think, for the identity of everyone. And regarding the Second World War and our big neighbor Russia or Soviet Union, of course the bitterness in the families, where there were tens of thousands casualties, as you can imagine, and the new period when you then start to build the friendship with your former enemy, it was difficult, but somehow the people started to think maybe more pragmatic way, in a way that, well, we have defended ourselves, we have maintained our own system in society, we are still a free market economy, we have a parliament, we can vote several parties, this is not a one-party system, so we are winner. We have been, even if you lose some of your ground, some of your territory, you were winning to keep your system and your democratic rights and your individual rights. And in that sense, you can declare yourself as a winner of the war. And I think this kind of building identity on those positive sides that were achieved or were remaining after the war is also something important, I think, in our identity. I would say so.
Thank you very much. And in reference to the mediation aspect of the foreign policy in Finland, those of us who study the subject, the moment you think of Finland and mediation, our minds jumps to Aceh and the achievements by President Ahtisaari in Aceh and so on. Since then, are you in sort of free to speak about where else are you involved? And in particular, is there a Finnish model, do you think? I mean, is there a secret way, a certain way, a magic formula that is particularly Finnish in terms of mediation?
Maybe I tell you this is a real secret now. I tell you a secret formula first on Aceh, because I happen to know a person who was heading the President Ahtisaari's office before the Aceh project started, and then this person revealed me afterwards that there was a guy who came from the door, and he said that he had perfect contacts to all parties in Aceh, and probably President Ahtisaari would be interested to meet with him. And then this person in the office, maybe he had a bad day, he was thinking that, oh, all right, this is irrelevant, this is not serious, so this is not in our program at the moment. But then he anyhow mentioned to President Ahtisaari that this kind of person has been visiting the office. And then President Ahtisaari immediately said he wants to meet this person. And that was the beginning of the Aceh process. And this actually, I think it's a good lesson to learn, that you should listen weak signals sometimes, or very weak signals, that somebody comes with the idea or view or something. I maybe mention one issue on Sudan and Darfur talks. I was in Abuja and as a European Union representative, and there were always two silent men standing at the door of the negotiations, and I get very curious, who are these people? And I went to them, and these were Eritreans, Mr. Yamane Gebreap and others, and his colleagues, and then I actually, when you started to interact with them, you understood better that also they had a role, sometimes hosting the rebels, sometimes maybe training the rebels and so forth, but with nobody from the international community had really been interacting with them properly. And we started the interaction, visited Asmara, talked to them, asked their support to the peace process and others, and I think that was a component that was needed in that. But I think to keep your eyes open is important for peace processes. And then you asked that where are we now? Of course, we try to support many processes. We have been active in Somalia. We have been following the Somalia peace process from many angles. We have been as supportive as we can on I mentioned the water diplomacy, the conflict between Egypt and Ethiopia on the building of the dam, the Renaissance Dam. These are, of course, issues which in that region should be solved. Sudan is something that we have been following closely also. And then, of course, in our own continent, European continent, the Kosovo-Serbia conflict, the Pristina-Belgrade dialogue is very important for us. And there actually, when people are always asking that can European Union influence, I think, to give in this European perspective in the Balkans, like we now had North Macedonia and Albania starting the negotiations with the European Union, and when we look the possibilities of in the future for Serbia and Kosovo also get more integrated to the European family, I think that would be advantage for both of these countries economically and so on. So I think there is a possibility for European Union really to offer something in the process.
And also in your presentation, you in passing mentioned a center for mediation. Is this going to be part of the foreign ministry? And it's very interesting because I think here we're also people are considering ideas of how you strengthen and structure mediation in a more sustainable manner. Can you just say a little bit about the center and what kind of relationship it will have with the academia, with the think tanks, civil society in Finland?
It's a good question, because we have traditionally we have had the funding has coming to the non-governmental organizations or to the international organizations from the ministry, and we have been distributing money to the President Ahtisaari CMI or Finchurch Aid FCA, which has been extremely active on some mediation issues, or international organizations, European Institute of Peace or Center for Humanitarian Dialogue or Interpeace and so forth, which we are supporting. And then my remark as a minister beginning of the work was that, well, we have a very little institutional memory. What kind of these projects have been and what has been achieved and so forth. And particularly the peace processes have this very strange phenomena that many of them are very secret ones. They might be successful or unsuccessful, but the organizations who are running these processes keep the information themselves. So we decided to establish in the ministry this kind of what we call the Center for Mediation. It's a unit inside the ministry. It's a unit, of course, that is giving still support to other actors, but is also collecting the information and meeting regularly with those who are doing the mediation, but also, if needed, offering their own services. And of course, we are still, when you ask that what kind of mediation efforts, of course, we are still, like I think Qatar is doing in a perfect way, offering the space for people to meet. And for example, in Helsinki this autumn, we had the Americans and Russians discussing about the New START agreement and so forth. So we are then just, the ones who give the warm room and some food to the negotiators, but otherwise it's their responsibility how they run the talks. But there might be, of course, occasions where we can then contribute also on the mediation or facilitation side, and our people in the ministry want to train our people also to that, and having a little bit more this kind of sensitiveness that there are, which are the possibilities and when this kind of help is needed.
Very good. I think this is very relevant to what some of the issues that are faced here. And in terms of competition, if I may go into this, as a small state mediator, often it's very difficult to find your corner. There are big, muscly ones. I can't but ask you, how do you manage with Germany in the EU structure? I mean, they, with all due respect, obviously, to Germany, and we know that the size of Germany dictates a lot of things. How does that relationship work when it comes to mediation?
Well, I think you touch a very relevant area, because I have always been saying that mediation is a very competed area, and like any field of the world and life, but it's a very competed area, and you can manage there only by being good, with the quality. And it's not enough that you say that I'm a mediator, but you have to be a good mediator. You have to have a quality, and you have to offer something that the others do not offer. Then to your question of competition, of course, you know we are coming from the Nordic family, and we have excellent cooperation, but we always have also among the Nordics good competition, which is who is doing more and who is what. It's an interesting game. But we mostly share what we have achieved or what we are planning and so forth, and the same also with Germany. Of course, Germany has in recent years developed a lot this type of activities and is more and more active and so forth. And I have not come in this kind of direct competition situation, but if you ask that what to do, my advice to my people is that okay. If you want to be a mediator in Syria, or if you want to be a mediator in Libya, these are quite crowded processes. But if you are interested on Eritrea, or if you want to do something in Myanmar or somewhere else, that those might be places that there are not too many actors in the field. So please look again, this sensitiveness to look those areas where your capacity, your quality, your expertise would be needed, and concentrate to those issues. And then the other topic is maybe to choose something, some substance. You know, you can, if you want to concentrate on the role of women or environmental issues or something, that there are many processes that need a component, and you can give that component to the process. I always remember from, sorry, many examples are from Sudan and Darfur, but I was so deeply involved at some moment. We discussed with the people in the desert that you know, development will come to the villages, and then people asked, I'm so sorry, but I don't know what development means. Can you explain? And then we really realized that, well, we are talking to people who cannot even imagine what health and education and women's rights or something would mean for them. So let's organize a training, and let's tell people, you know, what development means and what it could mean, and let's compare with other peace processes, that somebody from some other, like Archie or someone, can come and tell what it meant to us, and so forth. And these are issues where you can actually jump in the peace processes, do some capacity building where you are good at, and you have good expertise. And so you don't have to own the whole process, but you can own a component in the process. Cooperation is a key word there.
Thank you very much. We'll take a few questions, if there are questions from the audience, and then we'll continue, because I'm very conscious of your time.
No problem.
Please, تفضل. مين معه الميكروفون؟
There was also on the back, the lady.
Yeah. If you can, please introduce yourself as you ask the question and keep it concise.
شكرا جزيلا. سمير الحجابي صحفي.
Be a journalist. I have two direct questions to His Excellency. So, thank you, Your Excellency, for this lecture. I have two questions for you. So, maybe you have talked about some things that are intangible. When you talked, for example, about Finland and the territories, it has always been, you know, when it comes to the territories, we're always volatile, maybe some more territories, some less territories. And now if you examine the map, you see it like a hand. It is drawn, the border is drawn in a weird way. So this actually losing part of the territory, maybe it's not a big deal or a big problem, so moving from one land to another, so it's not like a big change, you can accept it. But what about Palestine, for example, the Palestinians who lost all their land? How can you create peace for these people living in camps? Real people lost all the land and not just a bit of their territory. And then the second point is regarding peacemaking. And Your Excellency, you have talked about peace in Afghanistan, Darfur, Eritrea, and other locations. There's also another form, for example, if there are wars, weapons wars, there's also intellectual wars. For example, what can you tell us about what's happening in France and this infringement or this attack on the Arab identity, Islamic identity, and our Prophet Muhammad? So, and then there is a cycle of problems and wars, and then we would need more mediation. So how can you, what can you tell us about this problematic issue that was created by France? Thank you. Dr. Hamid.
Thank you so much.
شكرا جزيلا. اسمي حامد
I'm the
علي.
Dean of the School of Public Administration and Development Economics. And of course, Haavisto, because I myself is from Sudan, I'm from Darfur, so we know that you are very persuasive on the peace process in Sudan for quite a while. My question that I have is, there is a war fatigue now, conflict fatigues all over the world. And with the decline of the multilateralism is declining around the world. And having a peace means we need to have resources to build a peace. With the lack of resources, with the fatigue, with the lack of the multilateralism, do you think that these guys are going to be staying in the bunkers waiting to get a little bit of a rest. Then they can go back again to conflict. This is one. And the other one is, why not we are focusing more on the conflict prevention? Because we know that there are hotspots around the world, and soon they're going to explode. Why not the international community focusing on those efforts rather than putting off the fire after every other time that exploded? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It's such an
شكرا
honor to
جزيلا
meet you in
صاحب
person.
السعادة، تشرفت
Apologies,
بلقائي وأنا
I think it was a
أعتذر
mistake from my side rather than your side, but you were kind enough, Dr. Sultan.
لا لا I organized it. I should have been very, very clear.
Not at all. And thank you very much for the I consider it very educational and informative remarks, as well as answers and discussion. A number of points that were mentioned, I think, are lessons learned for us here in Qatar. Small states do face particular challenges, but sometimes they're in a very good position as well to maneuver faster than others, and sometimes being more neutral than big states that might have more of hard positions toward particular cases and portfolios. Now, a question and an idea around an initiative, as a matter of fact. Speaking of the heated discussions around Islam, Islamophobia, hate speech, freedom of expression, and so on and so forth. I was wondering whether mediation in this kind of context would be something to be considered. It's not the traditional kind of mediation. It's more about maybe building bridges, building more understanding. And we have been contemplating here in Qatar around initiating some sort of a call, some sort of an agreement, some sort of an initiative around or along those lines. Freedom of expression on the one hand, but then tolerance, respect for all people, and basically combating hate speech and discrimination based on religion, race, gender, and what have you. Thank you very much, and I apologize once again for the delay in the very beginning.
Thank you so much. We'll give the opportunity now to the Minister to respond to these three issues, and then we'll take another round of questions, if you don't mind. Do you need me to remind you of them, or you're okay?
Yes, that would be good. Thank you, and thank you for very, very good questions. First, it was a question of if you lose your whole territory, what then? And of course, I today, with the Foreign Minister, remembered 1990 autumn and the Iraqi occupation of Kuwait, and when the Kuwaiti delegation came to Finnish Parliament as well, and basically told that they have lost their whole country to the occupation, and of course the feeling that you could share with them, and the burden, and also the UN principles that we should together fight for this kind of occupations. And you referred rightly to Palestine, and I don't. It would take another hour to go to the normalization effects and so forth, but when I was talking to the Palestinian foreign minister just some weeks ago, I really encourage also the Palestinian Authority to build a view and view for the future, how to develop their own nation, and how to go now to this two-state solution in a constructive way. And of course that would need elections, that would need Fatah-Hamas cooperation, Gaza, West Bank, and so forth. I remember when I was working again for the UN in making the environmental assessment in occupied Palestinian territory, and all the facing all the grievances that they had, and some Palestinians said, it was maybe 2004, they said that things cannot go worse. This is so bad that things cannot go worse, and I was always saying that I'm so sorry to say, but things can even go worse, you know, and so it happened. The the things have not gone to the better direction. But I think at this moment Palestinians need our support more than ever, but also they need to get their own acts together at this moment and in a peaceful manner to build a functional state. You also referred to the intellectual wars, and I think, Madam Minister, you raised the very same topic. These are, of course, we can see how one issue can trigger another. We see this kind of circle of negative statements, and it's happening in front of our eyes. And I actually share very much your view, Madam Minister, that how to reverse this kind of development. Of course, we had in the Finnish Parliament a very heated debate on this issue, and what, of course, our government condemned the attack against the teacher and murder of the teacher and so forth. But I also said that, don't you see that many religional teachers join the sorrow of people due to this incident and do not accept what has happened and have expressed themselves very clearly on this issue. And I think it's, again, this issue of respect and tolerance and freedom of speech. I think it's a combination that we are all responsible that things do not go in an uncontrolled way. Then the issue of multilateralism, gentlemen, he was asking, and really my feeling is that when we have gone to this world, that my state first type of thinking, and we have seen it on the other side of the Atlantic, but we have seen it all over the globe. You know, this type of nationalistic and or ultra-nationalistic attitudes, and where it's only let's take care only my people, and that's a very disastrous way, and I think that for that reason we have to advocate the multilateralism and do our part of that. And I know that France and Germany collected this group of countries advocating multilateralism, and I think it's a good initiative and good idea to remind how important multilateralism. But I also agree with you on the conflict prevention issue. I didn't mention it in my speech, but of course whatever you can do, I think again, we know that hate speech might lead then to the real violence on the ground, and sometimes we have seen radio stations, you know, delivering hate speech messages and media working towards that direction. How important it is that we react at the early stage to this kind of messages. And then finally, Madam Minister, you referred what role the small states can play, and you can be flexible, you can be rapid, and I really think that this rapidness is also very important. Also some kind of courage, that you know, if you start to calculate, if we jump to this peace process, are we on the winning side in the end? You know, do we know that there will be peace? We don't know. You have to have a certain courage also to touch something that is maybe not self-evident that it will lead to the good result, but you still you feel that, okay, let's try it. It's worth of trying, and we see in many peace processes that they might last several years, and there are many different periods, but you have to start from somewhere. Thank you for your idea.
Thank you. I'm getting a signal from your ambassador that we have to be careful with time.
Well, let's go for a while to the other round, and then it's fine.
The minister is happy to stay a bit longer, so with your permission, I will continue. Dr. Habiba, from Afghanistan, and then I'll come back to you, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barakat. Your Excellency, Minister Haavisto, thank you mentioning about Afghanistan. I am Habiba, one of the negotiators among the 4 women negotiators, and also among the 21 male or main negotiator, that 4 of them, they are here with me. You talked about inclusivity. We are 4 women here among all the other negotiators and be involved in every sector or every field of discussion during the negotiation. But my special request from your side that I want, as a co-host in the Geneva conference, I want to request you that to have a very clear and strong message for inclusivity in the Geneva conference on the women inclusivity and also minority and the victim of war, which is something very important for us during the negotiation, and especially to bring Taliban with this topic. It's very important for our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Tamer, just behind you there. I'll come back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your Excellency, I'm a professor of public policy here, and one of the most difficult topics we teach our students goes around aid neutrality, aid impartiality, the good principles of delivering aid in any context. But we also know about aid politics, or the politicizing of aid, and that's also another big challenge also. So, I mean, you are in a very great advantage that you wear the 2 hats. You were an aid practitioner for a long time, worked for several UN missions, aid organizations, an ambassador for good aid practices. At the same time, you're now a politician or representing a political party. So what has changed? Can you share with us your insights as a person on the entire field of aid delivery and aid approaches? What's really happening? Is there such thing as aid impartiality? How politics affects aid? And now in your position as a minister representing a great country like Finland, are you more free or you're more constrained because of the politics of your own country? Thank you.
Thank you. Please, do you have a microphone on this side?
There's one lady on the very back.
Thank you very much. I'm Andriy Kuzmenko, Ambassador of Ukraine. Your Excellency, thank you for fantastic lecture. It was very interesting and instrumental. But I would like to ask you, under the current conditions, after the brutal Russian aggression against Ukraine, which meant, in fact, the demolition of the system based on international law, on legal obligations, on treaties. Instead, we have the hybrid wars and hybrid diplomacy. What lessons should be learned by the international peacekeeping, peacemaking, peace prevention?
If you allow me, I'll take 2 more questions, and then we'll bring it to a conclusion, because I'm very conscious your ambassador is with us for long term, you know. So we have to keep her happy and follow her schedule. Just in
There's a lady on the back row.
Yeah, we'll take the lady at the back, and then Raed, sorry, at the back here also. We'll take these 2 questions, and then I promise we'll let you.
Hello, Minister. Thank you for seeing me so far. We are pleased to have you here between us. My name is Fatima Abdin, a student in Crisis Management and Humanitarian Action, Doha Institute. My question is, did Finland have any effort or any plans in solving Gulf Qatar crisis? And thank you.
أوه. أنا لو ما عرفتش بدي الماسك، لو عرفت كان ما خليتك تسألي. I know you, يا فاطمة. Okay, تفضل.
Thank you, Excellency. My name is Abdul Waris. I am a graduate student of Doha Institute. For the Afghan peace talks to succeed, there is a need of moral authority. I think that's given by religious figures. And US, Taliban, and to a certain degree, Afghan government lack this authority. In your speech, you mentioned the inclusion of religious authority. What is Finland doing for inclusion of the religious authority in the peace talks or in mediation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have 2 questions on inclusivity, one on women, one on religion. If you'd like to address those first.
Yes, I probably have my going in the order I have on my paper. First, actually, friend from Afghanistan, Dr. Hakima, you asked how the role of the women could and should be included in the Geneva conference and so forth. And definitely that's one of our aims, that those results that have been received during the last 19 years should not be lost in that process, but instead there should be a widened approach of the women's and girls' rights and particularly educational rights in the whole Afghanistan. And I think that's a common message from the whole donor community. So when I'm talking to donors now and ask, can you pledge for coming 4 years for Afghanistan, the immediate question to us is that will this mean that those results that we already have will be protected, and will this bring new results for the role of the women and girls in Afghanistan? And this is definitely our aim. And of course the difference now with this pledging round will be that there will be this kind of checkups or yearly moments and certain conditionality also from the donor community that these goals should be achieved and so forth. So I really guarantee that these topics will be up in the coming discussions. Then there was the question of the actually on the aid and the political or unpolitical nature of the aid, and it's an interesting question because I have been sometimes saying in my ministry that we should make an archaeological survey on development aid, that and this kind of political archaeology. I mean that particularly during the Cold War, there were governments like us who balanced between the, so to say, the socialist and non-socialist groups also in the development aid. So if you had this country, then came Vietnam, and then came this country, and so forth. It's a very, very interesting political archaeology that you can find there, because countries were either in a Soviet grouping or in the other grouping. And I always remember when in some of my first meetings in Sudan, there was a Sudanese minister who said that, oh, it's such a pity that the Cold War ended. And I said, what is so bad that Cold War ended? He said, well, no, earlier we went to Washington, and if Washington didn't give us enough, we went to Moscow. So there was a bargain between Washington and Moscow for some developing countries and so forth. But it's definitely, there is a history of the political history already in the development. How it do today affects, of course, now it's more maybe linked to this, if you go to the conflict regions, this kind of peace process, and how the development and the peace processes can support each other. And I think Afghanistan is a perfect example on that. And then there is a separate portfolio, of course, as we all know about the humanitarian aid, which should be unpoliticized and should be delivered also in the areas of opposition and so forth. But there is always a question, you know, if we today say that people in North Korea would need food aid. It's not easy to deliver in the current circumstances for many of the restrictions and constraints and so forth. And do we have same criteria with the hungry people in North Korea than hungry people somewhere else? It's a good question. And of course, the accessibility is also an issue. I think conflict in Yemen is a good example where it's very difficult to reach people who should be reached, or Syria and so forth. Now I'm looking my glasses that I can see what I have been writing here.
On Ukraine.
Ukraine was a question as well. Yes, now you have them all. On Ukraine, you are right that of course the international community reacted, I would say, as strongly as it could to the occupation of Crimea and the ongoing war or keeping the war going on in the eastern Ukraine, and we are part of definitely those sanctions and supported the sanctions of European Union towards Russia on these illegal acts towards the Crimea and eastern Ukraine. And at the same time, of course, we have been trying to support the integration of Ukraine also to the European economies and energy networks and all these issues. Finland has been contributed also to the OSCE, to the civilian crisis management people who are following that the border ceasefire should be respected and so forth and so forth. This is what we have done so far, and of course we have been very strong on our message also towards Russia that the principles of the Minsk agreement should be respected, and the Minsk agreement and the peaceful way of solving the conflict should be the only way to go ahead. And this is where we are, and hopefully there will be light in the end of the tunnel on this issue. To the question of Gulf Qatari mediation. Of course, today we touched this issue also. How is the Gulf Cooperation Council working, and what is the mood, and what are the points for the future regarding from Qataris will be discussed with the foreign minister, and of course for our perspective it will be very important that the Gulf countries could come together and have normal cooperation together and so forth. We know how important the regional cooperation is from our Nordic cooperation, from our Baltic Sea cooperation in our region and so forth. But I have to say, very difficult to give any advice other than to continue communication and try to solve those remaining grievances that countries have between them. At the moment, I cannot see any Finnish component in the helping this, but of course, if there be a request, we are always ready to consider. I also have to underline that when the requests on solving some conflicts or problems are coming, this request should come from the two parties or from the all parties at the same time, because it's not enough that you get from one side a request that can you help us, but it should be the one who is a trusted mediator or facilitator should be then trusted by each and everyone to solve the conflict. And then finally on religious leaders' role, whether it be Afghanistan or so, what we have noticed is that in many conflicts, now I take Somalia for example as an example, because we have done that there quite a lot through Finnish organizations, that we see that the role of the religious leaders is very important to advocate the peace and find the peaceful solutions. And the religious leaders can come together and deliver common messages on supporting the peace and working for the peace, and don't give any religional excuse for continuing the conflict. And I think this is true also with Afghanistan currently, that there shouldn't be any religional excuses of continuing the conflict. And in that sense, religious leaders play a very crucial role. Then we always have the other debate, which is asking that, well, but these religious leaders very often are men. They don't maybe see the role of women in the same way as the other parts of the society are seeing. So can we only rely on religious leader? And I don't say that that's the only component. There has to be other components, but it is an important component, and it affects too many people in the conflicts, and that's why we also have had this kind of networks of religious leaders, and we are advocating that. And this is also actually an answer to the wider question of the atmosphere in our societies towards the Islam and Muslims, between Christians and so forth, that we also had to advocate the religious leaders from Islam and Christian beliefs and Judaism and others to come together, because there are certain values which should include the tolerance as well between the religious leaders, and that's what's very important in the current atmosphere where we are living.
Thank you so much. We're extremely grateful for the time you were able to spend with us. I'm sorry, we must close. We were already overrun by about half an hour to what we scheduled originally. So we're very, very grateful. We hope there'll be other opportunity to do this again. I'd just like to press on the issue of the role in helping to resolve the Gulf conflict. I do hope that Finland and other countries stop seeing it as a conflict amongst brothers, because we have tried that route. It hasn't resolved any problem. I think there is a need for a track 2, possibly without them approaching you for support, but maybe the non-governmental organizations, the same way they offer assistance elsewhere. Maybe opportunities have got to be explored in some ways. But I'm extremely grateful. I'm also grateful to our team who helped us organize today. Maysa Abu Hilal, Ustad Ali Al-Kaabi, Rand, and there are many who worked behind the scenes to make this successful. And of course, I'd like to thank Your Excellency, the Ambassador, and your team for helping us arrange this. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for this, Minister. Thank you.
We now move to
Thank you so much. Okay, thank you.